Inside, Amara's voice trembled. Mama, how can I tell him? How do I tell Danny that the boy he loves like a brother is actually my son? That Obina was born out of the worst night of my life. Danny's breath caught in his throat. He stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Obina, his beloved brother-in-law, wasn't Amara's brother. He was her son. As a young girl in Eziama village, Amara had been full of dreams. Her future had seemed bright and clear, and she had known exactly what she wanted. She was smart, beautiful, and people often whispered about her as she walked by. Amara, the village beauty, they called her. Many young men wanted her attention, but she wasn't interested. Her mind was set on one thing, which was her studies. Her mother, Nneka, had always supported her dreams since her father passed away when Amara was a little girl. It had just been the two of them. Nneka worked tirelessly to provide for Amara, determined to see her daughter succeed. Their bond was unbreakable. They shared everything together, dreams, hopes, and their fears. For Nneka, Amara was her joy and her hope for a better future. Amara had big plans. She wanted to finish her education, leave the village, and build a better life for herself and for her mother. She knew her mother had sacrificed so much, and she was determined to repay her by achieving all the things they had talked about late into the night. They would sit by the small fire outside their home, and Amara would speak of her future, her eyes shining with excitement. I will become a great lawyer, Mama. We will leave this village and live in the city. You won't have to work so hard anymore. Amara had promised. Nneka would smile, pride shining in her eyes. I believe in you, Amara. You will do great things, my child. It was in her final year of secondary school when everything changed. Amara had always been a bright student. Her teachers praised her, and most of her classmates admired her. She was focused on her studies and rarely let anything distract her, but not everyone was happy with her success. There was a group of boys in her school who called themselves the Untouchables. They were notorious for causing troubles. Everyone knew them and everyone feared them, even the teachers. They seemed to have a way of getting out of trouble no matter what they did. Chukwudi, their leader, was known for his arrogance and cruelty. He walked around the school like he owned it, and many students stayed out of his way. But Chukwudi had taken an interest in Amara. He watched her from a distance, his eyes always following her as she walked past him in the school corridors. At first, she ignored him, hoping he would lose interest, but Chukwudi wasn't the kind of boy to be ignored. One afternoon, after classes had ended, Chukwudi waited for Amara near the school gate. She saw him standing there with his friends, his hands in his pockets, a smirk on his face. Amara pretended not to notice, but he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Amara, why are you always acting like you're too good for me? Chukwudi asked, his tone teasing, but with an edge of menace. Amara looked at him in the eye. She was not afraid of him. I don't have time for your games, Chukwudi. Leave me alone, she said firmly. She brushed past him and continued walking, but she could feel his eyes on her as she went. She didn't look back. Chukwudi was angry. He didn't like being rejected, especially by a little girl like Amara. He thought he was untouchable. He could have whatever he wanted, and no one could say no to him, so he decided that he would teach her a lesson. Days passed, and Chukwudi became more and more obsessed with the idea of getting back at Amara. He didn't want to just make her feel bad, he wanted to break her spirit. He and his friends planned it carefully. One evening, as Amara was walking home from school, they ambushed her. There were 5 of them, including a boy who didn't really belong with them. He was quiet and stood apart, always standing at the back of the group, watching but never really participating in their cruelty. He was being bullied and was forced to join their gang. This boy has been forced into their group by Chukwudi. He didn't want to be there, but he had no choice because he feared what Chukwudi would do to him. Chukwudi had threatened him and told him that if he didn't help them, his family would suffer dearly for it. That evening, Chukwudi and his friends cornered Amara She tried to run, but there were too many, too strong. What followed was too horrible to speak of and too painful to forget. They hurt her in a way that left her broken and shattered. The boy, the one who didn't want to be there, was trapped. He did what he was told because he was too afraid to say no. He was told to molest Amara, which he did. Chukudi had told him that that would be his proof of commitment, and if he refused, he would kill him. Amara's world crumbled that night. The dreams she had once spoken of with her mother seemed distant and impossible. The pain and shame she felt were too much for her to bear. When she returned home, Nneka immediately knew something was wrong. Her once vibrant and joyful daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. Amara couldn't look at her mother in the eye. She couldn't explain what had happened. The words wouldn't come, but Nneka knew. A mother always knows. "We need to leave this place, Amara," Nneka said gently, her voice filled with sadness. Amara nodded. She couldn't stay in Eziama anymore. The village, once full of hope and dreams, now felt like a prison of memories she wanted to escape. Together, they packed their few things and fled to the city of Enugu. When Amara and Nneka arrived in Enugu, everything felt different. The city bustled with life, and the noise of cars and people was a sharp contrast to the quiet of Eziama. For Amara, the change was necessary. Leaving behind the village meant leaving behind the painful memories, or at least trying to. She knew she had to rebuild her life, and that meant focusing on her future. But just as she was settling into her new life, something unexpected happened. Amara began to feel strange, tired all the time, her stomach unsettled. At first, she thought it was just the stress of the move or maybe the lingering pain from what had happened. But soon, it became clear that something was different. Nneka noticed it too. One evening, as they sat together in their small apartment, Nneka spoke gently. "Amara, are you feeling okay? You've been quiet and you look so pale." Amara shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mama, I think something is wrong with me." After their trip to the hospital, their fears were confirmed. Amara was pregnant. Amara was devastated. She had been trying so hard to forget that night, to move on, and now this living reminder of her trauma. She sat on the hospital bed, staring at the floor, her hands trembling. "Mama, what am I going to do? How can I bring a child into this world like this?" Nneka knelt beside her, her hand resting gentle on Amara's shoulders. "My daughter, this child is not to blame for what had happened. The baby is innocent, and I will help you through this. You are not alone." Amara's heart was heavy, but her mother's words gave her some comfort. Nneka promised that she would take care of the baby when the time came, allowing Amara to continue with her life. "You will go back to school, Amara. This will not stop you. I will look after this child." Amara nodded, though her heart was filled with uncertainty. She didn't know how she could face the future, but she trusted her mother. She always had. Months passed, and the day finally came when Amara gave birth to a baby boy. He was small and perfect, with bright eyes and soft cry that tugged at Amara's heart. Despite the circumstances of his birth, she loved him, and they named him Obina. And from the moment he was born, Nneka took on the role of his mother. As soon as she recovered, Amara returned to school. It wasn't easy, but she was determined to finish her education. Nneka raised Obina as her own, and as he grew, he knew Nneka as Mama and Amara as his big sister. There were no explanations, no complicated stories, just a simple life with the understanding that Nneka was the mother who cared for him and Amara was the sister who loved him. Obina grew up surrounded by love and care. He never questioned his family, and for him, life was simple. Amara, on the other hand, buried her pain deep inside, focusing on her studies and her future. She knew that no matter how hard she tried, the truth of Obina's birth would always be with her. But for now, it was a secret only she and her mother shared. Years passed and Amara's hard work paid off. She graduated from the university with honors, a proud moment for both her and Nneka. She became a lawyer, admired by many for her intelligence and dedication. Her colleagues spoke highly of her, and clients trusted her to handle their cases with care and precision. To them, Amara was a woman who had it all together, strong, capable, and confident. But beneath that strong exterior, Amara still carried the weight of her past. She loved Obina dearly, more than anything in the world. She watched him grow into a kind and respectful boy, always making her proud. Yet every time she looked at him, she was reminded of the night he was conceived, the night that changed everything. It was a secret she kept locked away, never letting it show, but it was always there, just beneath the surface. Years went by and Amara continued to build her career. She had become a successful lawyer, admired for her brilliance in the courtroom. But while her professional life thrived, her personal life was another story. She had avoided relationships for a long time, afraid of opening her heart to someone. The fear of her past catching up with her was always present, and the thought of letting someone get too close scared her. But then she met Daniel. Daniel was different from anyone Amara had ever known. He was charming, kind, and had a smile that made her feel at ease. They met at a mutual friend's event, and from the moment they spoke, Amara felt a connection she hadn't felt in years. Daniel was funny, thoughtful, and incredibly patient. He took his time getting to know Amara, never rushing her, never pressuring her to share more than she was comfortable with. But for the first time in a long time, Amara felt like she could let her guard down. With Daniel, she felt safe. He made her laugh, something she hadn't done freely in years. Their courtship was sweet and simple. They spent time together, talking about their dreams, their ambition, and their future. Daniel was everything Amara had ever wanted in a partner, and slowly she let herself fall in love with him. Their courtship didn't last long. Daniel proposed, and Amara, filled with hope and love, said yes. It was a whirlwind romance, and soon they were married. For Amara, it felt like she had finally found happiness. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life, and now she had someone to share it with. After their wedding, they moved into a beautiful house in Enugu. Amara felt like her life was finally falling in place. Daniel adored her, and she adored him. They laughed together, supported each other, and made plans for their future. To the outside world, they were a perfect couple, but inside, Amara carried a quiet fear. Deep down, she knew that her past would never truly be erased. She had tried to bury it, but it lingered like a shadow. She would wonder what would happen if Daniel ever found out. What if he learned the truth about her past? What if he knew about Obina? Obina, now a young teenager, continued to grow closer to Daniel. Two of them shared a bond that made Amara's heart swell with pride. Daniel treated Obina like his own younger brother, always looking out for him and offering him advice. To Obina, Daniel was the father figure he never known. They spent time together, going to football games and talking about life. It was almost perfect, and Amara couldn't help but feel very grateful. One warm afternoon, Daniel decided to come home early from work. He had finished his tasks ahead of time and thought it would be nice to surprise Amara. Their life had been running smoothly, and Daniel often felt like the luckiest man. Amara was everything he had ever wanted in a wife. She was intelligent, caring, beautiful, and a good cook. They had built a comfortable life together and was excited for their future. As he approached the house, Daniel noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. He paused, thinking that maybe Nneka or Amara had left it open by mistake. He stepped closer and was about to call out when he heard voices inside. It was Amara and her mother, Nneka. Their tones were harsh, but there was an urgency in their conversation that made Daniel to stop and listen. Amara, you can't keep hiding the truth from Daniel forever, Nneka said. Her voice was low but firm. Obina is getting older, and one day he will start asking questions. It is better he hears it from you than from someone else. Daniel is your husband. He is not a stranger. Daniel felt a strange sensation in his chest. What truth? What were they talking about? He took a step closer to the door, careful not to make a sound. His heart was starting to race, but he couldn't walk away. He needed to know. Inside, Amara's voice trembled. Mama, how can I tell him? How do I tell Daniel that the boy he loves like a brother is actually my son? That Obina was born out of the worst night of my life? Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Obina, His beloved brother-in-law wasn't Amara's brother, he was her son. And what was this about the worst night of her life? Daniel's heart began to pound in his chest. The truth hit him like a wave, crashing over him and leaving him dizzy. He leaned against the wall, feeling unsteady. All this time, he had believed that Obina was Amara's younger brother, raised by Nneka, but now everything he thought he knew about them was unraveling in front of him. How could this be? How could Amara have kept such a secret from him? Inside, Nneka's voice softened, full of concern. I know it's hard, Amara, but Daniel loves you. He deserves to know the truth. I know, Mama, Amara replied, her voice thick with emotions. But how do I explain to him that Obina was born from something so terrible? I don't want him to see me differently, Mama. Daniel's hand was shaking now. He knew he should go inside, confront them, demand answers, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. His head was spinning and his heart ached with confusion and betrayal. He took a step back, then another. He needed to get out of there, to clear his head, to think. But the worst part was the realization that Amara had kept this from him. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew so well, had been hiding a secret this big. A secret that involved not only her past, but their entire relationship. How could he ever look at her in the same way again? Daniel drove through the city streets, barely noticing where he was going. His mind was a mess of thought and emotion, swirling in every direction. The conversation he had overheard kept replaying in his mind, each word hitting him like a hammer. Amara had a son. Obina was not her brother, but her child, born from a painful experience she had kept hidden from him. The thought made his stomach turn. How could she have kept something so big from him? How could he not have seen it? The traffic lights flashed red, and Daniel slowed down, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His knuckles turned white as he stared at the road ahead, but his mind was elsewhere. His head dropped as he tried to make sense of all. Amara's words echoed in his mind. How can I tell Daniel that the boy he has loved like a son is actually my own son? Daniel felt his heart clench with pain. How could Amara have kept this from him? They had shared everything, or so he thought. They had built a life together, based on love and trust, and yet she had hidden such an important part of herself from him. What was worse, this secret wasn't just about her, it was about a child, a life born out of something terrible. That worst night she had spoken of. What had happened? What had she gone through? He thought. The lights turned green, but Daniel didn't notice. Cars behind him began honking, pulling him out of his thought. He pressed the accelerator and continued driving, but his mind remained in chaos. He couldn't face Amara, not yet. He needed time to process everything, to understand what he had heard and how it changed his life. Days passed, and Daniel couldn't bring himself to go home. He buried himself in work, staying at the office late into the night, trying to drown himself in the thoughts that haunted him. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal. The image of Amara, the woman he loved and trusted, was now clouded by the truth she had kept hidden. He wondered what else she hadn't told him. He wondered if he would ever look at her in the same way again. Daniel stayed in a hotel for those few days, avoiding any contact with Amara. He knew she must be worried, but he couldn't bring himself to call her. He needed space. He busied all her phone calls and needed a lot of time to think. The betrayal felt like a heavy weight on his chest that he couldn't shake off. It was Emeka, his closest friend, who finally convinced him to stop running. They met at a small bar one evening, the dim light casting shadows over their faces. Daniel hadn't told anyone about what he overheard, but Emeka could sense something was wrong. After a few drinks, Daniel finally opened up. I don't know what to do, Emeka, Daniel said, his voice low and filled with frustration. I found out something about Amara, something she's been keeping away from me for years. I don't even know how to feel. Emeka listened, sipping his drink thoughtfully. Secret like that can tear a person apart, my brother, he said. But running away won't solve anything. You need to go back and talk to her, find out the whole story. Daniel frowned, his heart heavy with the thought of facing Amara. How can I talk to her after this? She lied to me. Emeka, she hid something so big. How do I even trust her again? Emeka shook his head. Trust isn't something that comes easily, especially after this. But you won't know the full story until you sit down and hear her out. You deserve to know the truth, Daniel. Avoiding her won't make the problem disappear. You need answers, and you need to figure out how to move forward. Daniel knew Emeka was right. Deep down, he understood that running away wasn't going to fix anything. But the thought of confronting Amara or facing the reality of the situation filled him with dread. Still, Emeka's words stayed with him. He couldn't keep avoiding the issues. He couldn't stay in limbo forever, pretending that nothing had changed. He needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. You're right. I need to talk to her. I don't just know how to even start the conversation. Start by asking her why, Emeka said simply. Then go from there. With a heavy heart, Daniel left the bar that night, his mind filled with questions. He knew what he had to do, but it didn't make the situation any easier. The drive back to the hotel was quiet, and Daniel felt the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. He had to go home, he had to talk to Amara, but even as he made that decision, he couldn't shake the fear of what he might discover when he finally asked her to tell him the whole truth. When Daniel returned home, Amara was waiting. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She knew he had overheard the conversations with her mother, and the time had come to reveal the whole truth. As they sat in the living room, Amara spoke softly, her voice trembling. Daniel, I never wanted to keep this from you, but I was so scared and ashamed, scared as if you knew everything would fall apart. But Daniel remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Amara took a deep breath. Obina is not my brother, he's my son. I had him when I was just a little teenager, after something terrible happened to me. Daniel's heart ached as he listened, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. Amara continued, tears spilling from her eyes. It was my final year in secondary school. There was a group of boys, led by a boy named Chikudi. They were cruel and they hated me because I ignored them. And one evening, they ambushed me on my way back from school. Daniel's stomach twisted as the memories of his own past flooded back. Had he been part of a group like that? Could it be? I never wanted to tell you this, Amara continued, her voice breaking, but you deserve to know. They assaulted me, Daniel. They treated me badly. He asked one of the guys to rape me, and he did. And I became pregnant afterwards. Daniel felt sick. His hand began to tremble. He had to know. Amara, who were the boys? Do you remember their names? She looked at him, confused by the sudden question. Chukudi was the name of the leader. There were others, but I never knew their names. Daniel's heart pounded. The room spun around him. His worst fears had just come true. His heart felt like it was being torn apart as he watched Amara's face twist in disbelief. He had dreaded this moment, but he knew it was unavoidable. The truth, as ugly as his words, had to come out. Amara. His voice cracked as he spoke. It was me. I was part of that group. Amara froze, her eyes wide with shock, locked onto his for a moment. Amara froze, her eyes wide with shock, locked onto his. For a moment there was nothing but silence between them. The weight of his words seemed to hang in the air, suffocating them both. What are you saying? Amara whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel couldn't bring himself to look her in the eyes. He lowered his gaze to the floor, guilt flooding him like a wave. I didn't want to be part of it, he explained, his voice barely audible. Chukudi, he threatened me. He said if I didn't do what he asked, he would hurt me and my family. I was scared, Amara, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I was there that night. I was part of what happened to you. In fact, I was the one who did it. I was the shy boy that was forced to do the unthinkable. Amara's face went pale as his confession sank in. She took a step back, her body trembling as she tried to comprehend what he was telling her. For years, she had buried the pain of that night, trying to move on, trying to rebuild her life. And now, standing before her was the man she had married, the man she had loved and trusted, confessing that he had been one of the boys who had shattered her worlds. You were one of them, she whispered, her voice so faint that it was almost inaudible. Daniel nodded slowly, tears beginning to stream down his face. I never knew it was you, Amara. I swear I didn't know. If I had known. Stop! Amara screamed, cutting him off. Her voice, once weak and trembling, was now filled with anger and pain. Don't you dare make excuses. You destroyed my life, Daniel. You ruined everything. She was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to control her emotions. Daniel's heart ached as he watched her. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but he knew he had no right. The damage had already been done, and nothing he could say or do would change that. Amara, I am so sorry, he whispered, his voice choked with tears. I was young, I was scared, and I made the worst mistakes of my life. I've carried that guilt with me every single day, and if I could take it back, I would. But Amara wasn't listening. She couldn't hear anything over the sound of her own heart break. She took another step back, shaking her head as if trying to shake off the nightmare she had found herself in. You, you were supposed to be the one person I could trust, she said, her voice cracking. How could you? How could you be part of something so horrible and not tell me? I didn't know it was you, Daniel repeated, his voice filled with desperation. I was a victim of Chukwudi's bullying. I was naive and so scared to speak up. I never meant to hurt you. If I had known, don't say that, Amara shouted, her eyes filled with rage. Don't you dare say that. You were there, you were a part of it, and now you expect me to believe you didn't mean to hurt me. Her words cut through Daniel like a knife. He had no defense, no excuse that could justify what had happened that night. He could see the pain and betrayal written all over Amara's face, and it tore him apart. I'm so sorry, he whispered again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry, Amara, he said. But Amara couldn't bear to hear it. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, was now nothing more than a stranger to her, a stranger who had been part of the darkest moment of her entire life. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand. She couldn't stay in that room, in that house, with him any longer. The walls felt like they were closing in, the weight of his confession suffocating her, and without another word, Amara turned and ran out of the house, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind spinning with confusion and anger. Daniel stood frozen, watching her leave, his heart shattering into pieces. The moment she disappeared from sight, he collapsed onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't bother to wipe them away. The guilt and shame he had carried for years now felt heavier than ever. Amara walked aimlessly through the streets, her feet moving without purpose. Her heart felt heavy, weighed down by the betrayal that had just shattered her world. The man she had given her heart to, the one she trusted above all others, was now tied to the darkest memory of her life. Her mind raced, flooded with a mix of disbelief, pain, and confusion. How could Daniel, the man she loved so deeply, be connected to that horrific night? How had fate been so cruel? As she wondered, her legs grew weak, but her thoughts were relentless. She had tried so hard to forget what had happened, to bury that night deep in the past, but now it all felt raw and fresh again. The memories of the boys staring at Daniel while he did the unthinkable, their laughter, their cruelty, all came rushing back, and with it, the sense of helplessness she had felt then came. And now the man who had been her comfort was a part of that very nightmare. Amara found herself in a small park. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass. For what felt like hours, Amara sat there, lost in her pain. She tried to piece together how her life had come to this moment, but the more she thought, the more broken she felt. She had built a life with Daniel, trusted him, loved him, and now everything was falling apart. The trust she once had was shattered, and she couldn't see how she could ever forgive him. As the sky darkened, Amara realized that she couldn't stay in the park forever. Her emotions were still raw, but she knew she had to face Daniel again. Slowly, she stood up, wiping her tears from her cheek, and began the long walk back home. Each step felt heavy, as if the weight of her broken heart was pulling her down. When she finally reached the house, she walked over to the couch and sat down across from him, her face still streaked with tears. The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of everything left unsaid. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. I loved you, Daniel, she began, her voice cracking with emotions. I trusted you with everything. I thought you were different, and now I found out you were part of the worst moment of my life. How on earth am I supposed to forgive that? Daniel's shoulders slumped. He didn't have an answer. He knew there was nothing he could say to erase what had happened. No words that could undo the pain he had caused her. I don't know, he admitted quietly, looking down at the floor. I don't know how you can forgive me, but I am begging you. Please just give me a chance to make things right. Amara shook her head, more tears sliding down her face. I don't know if that's possible, Daniel. You were part of something that destroyed me. Every time I look at you now, all I can see is that night. How do I move past that? Daniel remained silent, knowing that no matter how much he wished he could take it all back, the damage had already been done. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Amara and Daniel barely spoke, and when they did, it was brief and filled with an unspoken pain. Amara avoided him as much as possible, retreating into her thoughts, trying to process the flood of emotions that had taken over her life. Daniel, on the other hand, had given her space, knowing that pushing her would only make things worse, but the silence between them was unbearable. One evening, Daniel couldn't take it any longer. He knew they needed to face what had happened, to talk about their future, no matter how uncertain it was. Amara, he began, his voice steady but soft. I know I can't ask for forgiveness. What I did, it's unforgivable. But I love you. I love you more than anything, and I don't want to lose you. Please, if you will let me, I want to try to make things right. I feared Chukudi would kill me, but I was just being a coward. Amara, if taking a bullet for you would make you forgive me, I'm ready to do it now. Please just give me a chance. Amara didn't look up at first. She wasn't sure if she could. Her heart was still heavy, and the wound was still fresh, but deep down she knew that avoiding the truth wouldn't help her move forward. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet him. I don't know if I can do this, Daniel, she said after a long pause, her voice quiet but firm. What happened? It changed me, and I don't know how to look at you and not remember that night. How do I help myself? Daniel's heart sank, but he nodded. He had expected this. I understand, he replied. I won't rush you or push you to forgive me. I just want to be here to support you in whatever way that I can. Amara sighed deeply, her mind still racing. But there is something else we need to talk about, she said, her tone shifting slightly. Obina deserves the truth. He deserves to know who his parents really are. Daniel's eyes softened as he listened to her. He had been thinking the same thing, but hearing Amara say it made it real. You're right, he agreed. Obina deserves to know the truth. He is old enough now, and we can't keep this from him any longer. Amara nodded, though a part of her still felt afraid. She wasn't sure how Obina would react, how he would handle learning the truth about his parentage, but she knew it was time. He had the right to know the story of how he came into this world, painful as it was. I will support whatever you decide, Daniel said gently, reaching out to take her hand. For a moment, Amara hesitated, but then she let him hold it, the smallest flicker of hope igniting between them. The road ahead was uncertain, and the wounds of the past were still raw, but maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to heal together. One evening, after dinner, she and Daniel decided to sit down with Obina. The three of them gathered in the living room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Amara could feel her heart racing, but she reminded herself that this was necessary. Daniel sat beside her, offering silent support. Obina sat beside them, unaware of what was coming, but sensing something serious. He looked at Amara with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What's going on? You both look so tense. Amara took a deep breath, exchanging a quick glance with Daniel. She didn't want to burden Obina with the darkest details of her past, but he deserved to know the truth, at least a softened version of it. Obina, Amara began softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. There is something very important that I need to tell you. It's something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was scared. I was afraid of how it would change things. Obina frowned, glancing between his mother and Daniel. What is it, Sister Amara? You are scaring me. Amara's grip tightened on Daniel's hand. She could feel her chest tighten with the weight of the moment, but she knew she had to go on. Obina, you're not my brother. You are my son, and Daniel is your father. The room fell silent as the words hung in the air. Obina stared at her, wide eyed, trying to process what he had just heard. What? He whispered, shaking his head slightly as if to clear the confusion. How? How is that possible? You've always been my big sister. Amara swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. She had practiced this moment over and over in her mind, but nothing could prepare her for the look of disbelief and confusion on Obina's face. She took a deep breath and began to explain, carefully choosing her words. Obina, when I was very young, something happened. Amara said gently, I was in secondary school when I got pregnant with you. It was a really difficult time and I was very scared. But your grandmother, which is my mom, and I decided to raise you as my brother to protect you. We thought it was the best way to keep you safe and away from any shame or misunderstanding. You were also the reason we had to relocate to the city of Enugu. Obina broke forward, his mind racing to catch up with everything she was saying. He looked at Daniel, then back at Amara. So Uncle Daniel isn't my uncle. How was he away from me? Amara's chest tightened. This was the hardest part to explain. She couldn't tell him everything. Not like this. She glanced at Daniel again, and he gave her a small nod, encouraging her to continue. Daniel never knew he had a child with me. We left Eziama village to start afresh, but after so many years, fate brought Daniel and I together again, Amara said, carefully avoiding the painful details. He didn't know the truth about you when we first got together, but when he found out, he was just as determined as I was to protect you and make sure you grew up with all the love and care you deserved. Obina's eyes darted between them, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. So, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't I know before now? Amara's heart ached with the pain in his voice. She had feared this reaction for too long. Obina, I thought I was doing what was best for you, she said softly, her voice cracking. I thought it would be easier for you to grow up without knowing the truth, but I realize now that I was wrong. You deserve to know who you are, and I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. Obina sat quietly for a long moment, absorbing everything she had said. The silence between them felt heavy, but there was also a sense of relief in the air. So what happens now? Obina asked quietly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Amara reached out and took his hand, her voice filled with love and reassurance. We move forward, she said gently. We are still a family, Obina. That hasn't changed. We'll figure out the rest together, but we wanted you to know the truth so that we can all move on. Daniel, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke up. Obina, I know this is a lot to take in, and it is going to take time for you to process it, but I want you to know that I am here for you no matter what. We are going to get through this together. Obina nodded slowly, though the confusion and shock were still clear on his face. He wasn't ready to fully process everything yet, but he didn't pull away from them. That, at least, was a small relief for Amara. She knew that it would take time for him to understand and accept everything, but at least the first step had to be taken. The days following the conversations were quiet but filled with cautious sense of hope. The truth, though softened, had been revealed. The initial shock was beginning to wear off. Mara and Daniel worked so hard to create a sense of normalcy in the house, though they knew it would take time for things to feel right again. Nneka's mother came to visit and encouraged them, telling them they were doing the right thing and advised them never to give up. For Obina, on his part, he was struggling to adjust. His world had been turned upside down, and the people he had trusted most had been keeping a massive secret from him. He withdrew into himself for a while, spending long hours in his room, trying to make sense of what he had learned. The revelation that Daniel was his father, not his uncle, was particularly difficult for him to accept. One evening, Obina came down to the living room where Daniel and Amara were sitting. He sat down quietly, avoiding their gazes for a moment. Finally, he looked up at Daniel. I don't know how to feel about all of this, Obina admitted, his voice low and unsure, but I guess I need time. Daniel nodded, his voice soft and understanding. I know, Obina, it's a lot to take in, and we are not expecting you to be okay with everything right away. Take all of the time you need. We will be here whenever you want to talk. Amara smiled weakly, her heart heavy but hopeful. We are still a family and nothing will change that, she said. I know it's hard, but we'll all get through this together. As time passed, the tension in the house began to ease. Little by little, Obina started spending more time with them again. He hadn't fully accepted everything, but he was trying, and that was all Amara could ask for. He never stopped seeing Nneka as his biological mother. The truth hadn't destroyed them the way she had feared it would, but the road to healing was still very long. Amara and Daniel too were working on rebuilding their relationship. They talked more openly now, sharing their fears, their hopes, and their regrets, and even enrolled for therapy. The pain of the past still lingered, but they were determined to move forward together. There were no easy solutions, but they both knew that they loved each other and wanted to fight for their family. In the end, Amara knew that the scars of the past would always be there, but she also knew that they didn't have to define her future. They were a family, and despite everything, they had survived. Together, they would move forward step by step into a future filled with hope and possibilities. The story teaches us that honesty is essential in relationships, and hiding the truth can cause deep wounds. It shows the power of forgiveness and the importance of facing the past to heal and move forward. The characters learn that while the scars of painful experiences may never fully disappear, love and family can help rebuild trust and create a path towards healing. It also emphasizes the importance of speaking out in the face of bullying and peer pressure, as staying silent can lead to harmful decisions. The story highlights how fear and intimidation can push someone to make wrong choices, but also shows the power of taking responsibility for those mistakes. Overall, it encourages standing up against injustice early on to avoid greater pain later and promote resilience in overcoming challenges. Thank you so much for watching this fantastic story on African Stories by Tiana. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing stories. See you next time.